Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Music Policy Forum Live. This is our weekly conversation program where we check in with a whole range of music stakeholders, all working together to see what we can do to build stronger, more resilient, and more equitable music ecosystems. I'm Michael Bracy. Very happy to be joining you from just outside Washington, D.C., where the cicadas are coming. Today is the first day we can hear them. We've been seeing them for the last week or so. We're about to be completely overwhelmed with them. But we're going to get through it just like we're all getting through everything. And today we have a real special program. We're really excited about all of our topics and look forward to getting into it in a few minutes. For those of you who join us every week, and for those of you who are new to the program, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules. We know everybody is extraordinarily busy, especially now where it feels like everything is happening at once. So for those of you who are joining us live, thank you. For those of you watching the archive, also thank you. If you're so inclined, feel free to put who you are and where you're joining from in the chat. We always love to see kind of the range of where people across the world are tuning in from. If you're shy, don't feel obligated to do that, of course. Throughout the day, the next hour, if you have questions, the Q&A box is great. And we'll be kind of keeping an eye on that box. And if there's some relevant questions, we'll be calling them up as appropriate. Also, as most of you know, all these programs are archived on our Music Policy Forum website. Thanks, as always, to Alex Dolan, who does a great job not only producing the live show, but making sure the archive is up with relevant links and all that. There's a lot of great programming for the last, oh my God, maybe 14 months since last April. A lot of great conversations and really good programming. So always encourage you to check that out. And see what all is in there. So I think, I'm not, normally we do kind of a news roundup, and I kind of sort of think that if you're watching the show, you kind of are following the news. I mean, it's really a hectic time in terms of music and reopening and kind of the next steps. We all are sort of navigating this new world of the CDC guidance and trying to understand how we can most effectively not only understand how to implement our protocols around reopening, but what that means in terms of our communications with our audiences and with our venue employees. We'll be talking a lot about that in our first segment with a bunch of community leaders from Seattle. We're also, again, waiting and expecting to see the shuttered venue operator money start to flow probably next week. That's the anticipation that money should be starting to hit bank accounts. And then we're moving into Memorial Day. We're moving into summer. I mean, things are just absolutely happening. So one of the things that, again, we love to do in this program is just make sure that we're doing everything we can to just provide a platform for resources and information activities. Matthew Cole is actually joining us up at the front end of the show. Matthew, if you can turn your camera on. Matthew is a jack of all trades, a organizer, activist, musician, community leader who unfortunately, well, Matthew, talk about the expertise that you probably never dreamed you'd want to build out, but you've kind of been building out over the last decade or so.
Well, I've produced about 120 music festivals around the country since 2005, and those were mostly for New Belgium Brewing Company. They were called the Tour de Fat. It was a employee-owned brewery that thought they should go out and do experiential branding behind the bicycle, which felt pretty great. And so we raised $5 million for bicycling by throwing concerts in the park with our friends, Reggie Watts and Nathaniel Rateliff and homies and stuff. But yeah,
so
how did that
we like? That's the good part.
That's the fun part.
What is the part of your expertise that you've had? Yeah, that's been.
Yeah. We owned and operated all our own stages and, solar powered, semi stages and all that stuff. And then 2016 was the year that everything sort of changed. I met Michael at that time and said, hey, I left New Belgium. My wife and I were just at Standing Rock, and we noticed that this 15,000 people gathered for this event looked a lot like a music festival. It looked a lot like a power damaged city or a refugee camp. And it was at that time it kind of clicked that these skills of organizing a temporary city were really applicable for disaster preparedness. So Michael, thank you again. You said, let's go right over to the NEA, talk about this a little bit. And within a few months, we'd found funding from the Mellon Foundation for a program called the Art of Mass Gatherings. And we've been doing emergency preparedness consulting the last 3 years for performing arts with Performing Arts Readiness.
That's awesome. And we're going to have you back on a later program to talk in more detail about this stuff. But we want to have you just for a minute at the beginning because you have a survey going in the field that is directly relevant to a lot of folks who watch this program. So if you could talk a little bit about the survey, and Alex is going to put a link in the chat.
Perfect. So these people like myself are not rare. We know that they're around, and it's a latent talent source. And so we want to know exactly how much enthusiasm is out there. And as ARP money is coming out, we think that this is a good opportunity for this platform, which is an experiential learning platform. And I'll just show you real quick what it looks like so your eyeballs kind of grok it. This is sort of the future we envision. These are event producers who know what they're doing and kind of bilingual across emergency preparedness and producing large festivals. These resilient hubs is what we see after safe outdoor space or safe spaces money goes away. We say, how about art money leads to classes like this where people can learn about emergency preparedness, weather emergencies, and stuff more in the performing arts area like harm reduction and accessibility for events. And so what if these monies could fund folks like us to go and learn these sort of skills in a stipended kind of residency sort of way? That's what we're throwing down the gauntlet and saying, hey, communities, go out there and propose that you might be a hub for one of these things. So the first step is to take this survey. We're asking arts organizations to share. It's in the chat. And we would love to see people around the nation say, yes, I'm an event producer. I want to take classes on this. I want to get a stipend to do it. We're talking WPA kind of level stuff, right? Why not use monies to get people back to work? So you're a sunny day event producer, stormy day emergency preparedness responder in your community. And we really think that city agencies have a lot to learn from us too. So this is all about mutual aid. This is about getting people, BIPOC and women who've been working in this for a long time and have not had a chance to share what they know because they've been working so hard. Let's put them in the driver's seat to teach what they know for safe, sustainable, accessible special events. That's the deal. So take the survey, advocate in your community for funding to produce this. We want to do it open architecture so you can produce your own with this experiential model. That's the jam.
Bam. That is well done, and nice to see lots of love for this concept in the chat. Matthew, why don't you drop whatever email address or other information people should use to follow up with you directly? We will be thrilled to get on your calendar for later in the summer and talk about this in more detail. In the meantime, I certainly encourage folks to check out that survey and let's see what we can build.
Thanks
so
for
awesome.
the encouragement.
Thank you for popping in. And now we're going to pivot into our good friends from Seattle. Scott Plusquellec, Kitty Wu, Shannon Welles, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see all of you. So today's, I feel like a hard conversation. We have been, again, I think most of the folks who participate in this program are very familiar with the Reopen Every Venue Safely initiative that Music Policy Forum launched in April of 2020. Seattle and King County has been one of our anchor pilots throughout that time, and Shannon and Kitty have been at the table essentially every 2 weeks for over a year with Scott and Dina Morris and Kate Becker and others, kind of going on this journey together about what does it mean to reopen music as quickly and safely as possible when science allows, and how do we talk about it? And, I think certainly from my perspective, a lot of us have been in a real sort of dichotomous mode for over a year, but certainly in the last month, that we have the sort of sense of being a little bit overwhelmed as things are getting to this next stage of reopening and trying to figure out how this is going to work and really just the pragmatic realities of this. And also just extraordinarily thankful that community leaders like you have and folks in cities across the country have come to the table to try to think through this in real time and a sense of community and partnership. So first of all, thank you for joining. And Scott, you've been with us before, and Shannon's been with us before. Kitty, I think this is your first time on this show. I know you were part of our intensive back in November. Alex, if you get to it, let's drop some links to their archives so people can go back and see some of the stuff that Scott and Shannon have said previously. But in the meantime, Scott, let's start with you. How are you? What do we need to know? What's the temperature in Seattle? Not literally the temperature. What's the metaphorical temperature in Seattle?
Yeah, you don't know. You don't want to know how cold it is here today. Oh my God. Things are very interesting right now. We have been informed by our governor that we are fully reopening on June 30th in the state. which is a bit of a whiplash-inducing statement, given that 2 weeks ago we were looking at perhaps going backwards into a more stricter phase. So I think it took everybody by surprise, and we're now at a point where just really trying to figure out what does that mean, and what does it mean for an industry that really can't open on June 30th, and that we are there's a delay between the idea of being able to open your doors fully on a set date at the end of June, and when tours will actually be happening, and when bands can be booked, and what all that looks like, and how to get your staff back and trained and or hired or rehired or all of that. So bit of a scramble as people are trying to figure this out. I think it's a mixture of like awkward enthusiasm that yay, we're towards the end of this maybe, and how great it'll be to have performances and live music again, and also kind of this, oh crap, what are we gonna do kind of thing. So I think that's the temperature.
And Scott, for those who weren't able to see your appearance on the program a couple months ago, talk a little bit about your role in the city and kind of how you see yourself fitting in to the broader ecosystem, especially as it relates to the nightlife economy.
Sure. So my title is, I'm with the City of Seattle. I'm the nightlife business advocate. I work in the Office of Economic Development. My role is sort of three-pronged. One is to just be a support and a liaison for our live music venues, our nightclubs, our cabarets, folks doing the nighttime economy work, and helping them navigate the bureaucracy of the city, and then working on developing policies and programs that will support and expand not just the entertainment side of nightlife and the nightlife economy, but just the full range of life at night and the work that is happening throughout our city when most of us are asleep. So really just working to make sure that we have a really vibrant and safe nights here in Seattle.
Yeah, and one of the, I think you guys probably get a little bit tired about hearing what a national model Seattle is, and at some points probably like, enough is enough. But Seattle certainly is, has a reputation, and the reality of when we talk about this kind of ecosystem thinking, and the notion of all this, trying to get the alignment between industry, public sector, philanthropy, nonprofit sector, education, everybody just trying to figure out how do we align resources and strategies to try to support each other. Seattle and the region, King County and the region, certainly is been willing to engage with the complexity of how hard that work is, but how important that is for a long time. And bringing Kitty in, Kitty, you work with 206 Zulu. You wear 14 hats like many people in the community, but talk a little bit about 206 Zulu and kind of what brought you into this sort of Revs network over the last year or so.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, the Seattle piece, because it's really interesting. I'm from 206 Zulu. My name's Kitty Wu. I'm the co-director here. And we're a little bit different than the other venues. We're a rental hall. We are housed in a beautiful building. It's a 100-year-old building called Washington Hall. We're it's owned by a public development association called Historic Seattle. So we are a little different. But one of the beautiful things that came out of this pandemic is all of these venues working together. It happened immediately, under the leadership of some really forward-thinking folks. But it was just really great to have, I wouldn't even consider it a complaining session every week, but just us really just trying to figure out how we're going to move forward. And, with everything going on, the CDC obviously kind of threw us for a loop last week. But, I think the main thing is like, how are we going to move forward in this? And what are the pieces that we need to get our venue workers back? And because I'm sure a lot of we lost some of our venue workers. So getting the ones that are able to come back and getting them just really geared up for it's looking like, for us at least, it's looking like a September date. We have some private events that are happening, which makes it feel a little bit safer because we can, work with smaller groups. But by September, it's looking like things are really gonna move forward.
Yeah, and I think tragically in the community, when you use the word lost, this is not people leaving the workforce. I mean, literally people who've we've lost. And Shannon, I know you had to kind of go from Shannon Welles with the Showbox Theater, the famous venue in Seattle, which had been in the middle of a huge sort of collective effort to save the venue, right? To save the Showbox, and then slamming right into pandemic. And I know you've, really been at the forefront of trying to make sure that as we think about music stakeholders, we think about community members, we think about the human element of this crisis, that venue workers can kind of sometimes be left out of that equation a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about some of the organizing that you did early? And I know you talked about some of the stuff on previous programs, but just some of the early stuff, and then we can kind of pick up to where we are today.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I had been working to save the Showbox for 2 years already by the time the pandemic hit. So I was already in the mindset of talking to public officials, trying to explain to them the importance of place and of music places and what they mean to people. And we got a lot of the venue workers involved in that campaign. So it was like I'd already started building those networks. And so when the pandemic hit, we all started meeting together. So the opportunity to join Revs came up and I jumped right in. And I really focused on venue workers a lot because I am a venue worker and I have worked in venues for over 20 years. So I know that life really well. And I've also worked in Seattle, downtown in Seattle for 20 years. So I know what it's like to live at night and to be out there on the street at night and to, so that connects with Scott's work because that's what he's trying to advocate for. So we speak the same language and it's really helpful to have him in that position as an advocate. And so early on, there were a lot of issues with unemployment and our workers getting unemployment. And part of it was maybe they didn't have enough hours. So they didn't meet the hours threshold to get that. And the PUA, the federal programs, didn't exist then. So we were looking at all of these employees who were not going to be able to have any money coming in, and everybody was freaking out. So for about 3 months, I helped people navigate unemployment. And as the federal programs were rolling out, like trying to get employees to understand what it meant and helping them sign up for unemployment. And so during that time, there was the extra $600 a week for a while with the federal program, but then that was going away in July. So a couple people reached out to offer support in some way, like we want to raise money to give to the staff. So timing wise, it seemed like, okay, this is going to happen right as the federal money is going away, like the extra 600. So what are people going to need? Well, they're going to need money to pay rent and all that, but they're really going to need money to buy food. So we couldn't raise enough money to pay everybody's rent, but we could certainly buy food for people. So we did a couple of big fundraisers. We sold some posters and some ticket masks. And Alex, if you want to throw up the picture screen now, that would be good. So we arranged 2 big grocery days for the Showbox. We did one in July of 2020, and then we did one in February of this year. And these were, so basically other people in the community approached me. They made the products that we sold. They gave me the money. I partnered with our concessionaire to use their suppliers. And so we could get things at a wholesale rate. And so we bought in bulk, huge bags of rice and beans, and we bagged them all up for people. We made these grocery bags and boxes, and each employee got to like 2 to 4 bags or boxes of food. It was a lot of food. So it was stuff, both like fresh food that we bought from local farmers through these distributors, and then also canned and dry storage items that would last for months. And honestly, like they have pasta probably for the next 2 years. Like they will never run out of pasta. So, I mean, it was very successful. And the employees felt loved and seen. And part of we talk about the Showbox family all the time. And so they felt part of the family and that people in the community were sticking up for them. And it was really heartening. And so that so after that, we started talking more in Revs about like, what more can we do to support the workers? And so that'll kind of transition over to, I don't know, are we going back to Kitty to talk about what we're doing?
Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go
sure.
back to Kitty.
And just this idea of like, as we're coming, closer, we've been, as Michael said, we have lost people. And everything that we've been together collectively, we're grieving. We haven't had to have, these collective, really spaces where we were able to heal together. We've had, there's anxiety, there's isolation. And as we're coming closer to this edge of like, we're about to reopen and things are getting better, but why don't we feel better? This idea of like wellness and mental health, and just really, this idea came about like, can we do something in a similar vein where we're, it's a celebration, because it can be a bummer talking about mental health issues. It's not necessarily always the funnest thing, or that folks even want to go to, like, it's not on my top of my list of like, let me go to a wellness event. But really getting our venues together, getting all of our venue workers, front of house and back of house, and kind of putting it out all on the table. So we have an event coming up. It's the last Tuesday of the month. It's ironically the day before the state opens up. But really just coming together to listen to some music, get on the same page, and provide some resources with public health and sound mental health, SMASH, Hold Your Crown. And we're just getting started. What am I missing, Scott?
No, that was a great summary. The one other piece that we're looking at is maybe having a vaccination pop-up truck there, so that people who have not been able to get their vaccinations yet would do that. But I just, one of the things that I'm most proud about with Revs that we've developed over this past year is touching back on what both Kitty and Shannon have said, is the community that has formed amongst these venue owners that really didn't actually know each other very well before. And we've had some really powerful meetings, emotional meetings, where, especially around this subject, where we started talking about these issues, where people were extremely just bearing things and really letting loose with the emotional toll that this year has had. And I don't think that there's been enough of that. And so this was a space, what started as this group of like, oh my God, let's get together and figure out how we're gonna physically survive. This has really turned into a support group in many ways. We talked about maybe we should have fewer meetings, or do we even need to continue? And people were adamant that we had to continue, that we had to, even just having we've gone to 2 every other week, but we were having weekly, but at every other week, just being able to have a place to come together and talk about these issues. So, and what became very clear to me was that how much these owners, operators, managers cared for their employees. And so it was just really important that we do something to acknowledge and give them some space as well. So
just to pick up on that quickly, Scott, again, we've been really fortunate and humbled, is a better word. We've been very humbled to support 18 Revs pilot communities across the country. We also recognize that means there are thousands of cities that don't have a Revs pilot project. They may or may not be having these kind of conversations locally, and something that we are really trying to figure out what we can do to kind of transfer some of those ideas and recommendations out to people who have not had the kind of infrastructure and the benefit from what we've had with Revs. With Revs, it's been remarkable to talk to Louisville and then take their ideas and put them through Cleveland and take it to Austin and take it to Seattle and have the kind of cross, kind of cultural network that has been allowing people to be thought partners and collaborators in real time. So we really do hope that we can, again, in a meaningful way, try to get some of these core ideas out there. And I think today in this conversation, we're just taking a big, a small piece of this, which is just trying to be very intentional with understanding what are the broader needs beyond economics of our venue employees. So let's talk just a little bit about, we talked about the CDC. We talked about, of course, last week in last week's program extensively when we had Curtis and Sean on talking about the NEVA reopening guidelines. One of the, again, sort of the complicated. So first of all, I mean, I feel very strongly that the CDC is working in good faith, and I think everybody is working in good faith. I don't think people are trying to be undermining. I don't think they're trying to, I think people are doing the best they can do. And I think, the decision was made, on a scientific level and on a political level that we need to simplify this decision for now that we're at a point where access to vaccines is not the challenge. It's not a supply issue, it's a demand issue. So I understand the thinking behind trying to simplify and say, look, if you're vaccinated, you get to do basically whatever you want to do. If you're not vaccinated, you've got to make a lot of choices. And so I understand that from a messaging standpoint. Clearly what that's done though is put a lot of pressure on our venue community where it's not quite that easy. And, I'd like for y'all to dig in just a little bit more in terms of what are we anticipating? What are you anticipating in terms of how do we talk to audiences? How do you talk to your employees? How do you talk to bands about what you want to do at your venue? And how do we make sure that we're not asking our venue employees who already are overtaxed and stressed to have to play an entirely different role of like security guards and like, narcs, trying to enforce this stuff? That's an easy question, right? Anybody want to speak to any of that stuff?
Well, I'm hoping by the time we reopen, we're not going to be in this 100% vax only type of scenario where we're asking people to prove things. Because I think that people that are trying to open right now might be considering that. I mean, we might not open until September. Maybe we'll have some shows in August. We're still trying to figure out the date. But I mean, I'm not really envisioning a scenario where we're enforcing this vaccination policy where you have to prove things. So that would take the pressure off. I don't know about mask wearing. I don't think we're going to be requiring masks, but optional. But I don't know. I think there's still so many unknowns. But maybe we'll have the benefit of waiting a little longer so we don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I agree. It's so strange because we're 14 months into it, but I feel like there's still so many unknowns. I think for us, I think masks is going to be a thing for a while. I don't think we'll necessarily be requiring everyone to wear masks inside, but for our staff, like a lot of people are just going to wear it, Yeah, there's a lot of questions, more questions than answers, I would say.
Yeah, we're really in sort of what?
No, I know. It's like an impossible question.
It's very much a gray area. And I think, we talked about this yesterday on the town hall, but I think one thing that perhaps will alleviate or help facilitate this some way is to try to have uniformity of experience from venue to venue, so that if you go to Kitty's venue and you are, whatever your experience is there around vaccinations or temperature checks or masks or whatever, that if you the next night go to Shannon's venue, your experience is exactly the same, so that you're not sort of whiplashing and being confused as, well, the night before I did this and they didn't care whether I wore a mask or not. And so just to try to keep the lid on any sort of confusion and belligerency and whatever else reactions might come, because I think we're going to have a lot of really hyped up, excited people who are going out and want to be there. And so as I really think that, I think it's going to be hard to do that, but I think that if the messaging is similar and the experience is similar, then I think there will be some ease of purpose in existence across the board.
Well, the one thing, and again, it's sort of the obvious, God, I'm really struggling with language today. I mean, I don't think it's overstated to say part of the tragedy of COVID over the past 14 months has been the diversity of experiences, where some states and regions have really been trying to err on the side of keeping people safe. And there have been some states and regions that maybe don't have the same values, or they've had a different approach. And it's been very different to see, as we move into this next stage of reopening, certain states where mask mandates are illegal, or there are other sort of things that businesses are not allowed to do. Washington State, Oregon, other states are probably going to be in a little bit of a different position in terms of being, eager and willing to sort of work with business to figure out what can we do. Kitty, you've spoken very eloquently about some of the equity challenges around vaccines and some of the things we can't just take for granted.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem that we're going to run into is, one, there are people that have health reasons, autoimmune diseases and issues why they really vaccines actually don't work for their bodies. And I think that's just one thing. Luckily, we have people like Kate Becker and Dr. Duchin here in King County that are really kind of just, I really trust our local leaders so much more than necessarily the CDC or, what some of our government folks have said. So we're just really looking to them. And King County Public Health has been really incredible in just terms of opening up our spaces. We had a vaccination event here at Washington Hall where, it's the people that are just, they're not quite sure if they want to get the vaccine, but they're willing to do little small groups of people. And I think every little bit of that counts at this point.
Yeah. Well, we're going to end with this great question in the Q&A from Christopher Walker, who looks like is going to be making the move from North Texas up to the Seattle area. Congratulations to your spouse, Christopher, and congratulations to you on making that move. Could you all just maybe put an email address in the chat or a resource? Christopher is looking for ways that he can kind of immediately plug into the community and help support these efforts when they gets up there later in the summer. So if y'all could just put something out there, or if you have any quick answers to that, it's sort of an endless question because there's so many opportunities to plug in the Seattle community. It's part of what makes it so special.
I do have one quick one. If you're here in July, we have our first public event at Pier 62. It's down on the waterfront. It's the 10th anniversary of Beatmasters, and it's a producer's battle. And Friends of Waterfront is our host. So I'll put that in the chat, Friends of Waterfront, or you can check out our website and I'll put a couple links in.
Awesome.
And I just threw go ahead, Shannon.
I was going to say Friends of the Waterfront has a whole list of summer programming that I just found out about it. They're doing dancing on the pier and music and all kinds of performances. So that's something that's already being scheduled. But I'm on this downtown revitalization work group, and we're planning lots of downtown summer outdoor activities. So you could also look at visitseattle.org, which is the tourism site that'll be listing all of these events. And the Downtown Seattle Association will also have information. And then you could check out The Stranger, which is our online and sometimes physical newspaper of all of the arts and culture goings on around town.
Awesome. Well,
and I put my email in there, and Kitty did too. Please, Matthew, reach out when you get here. I'd be happy to help connect you.
Christopher, yeah. All righty, Seattle folks, hang in there. Keep up the great work. Thank you for everything that you share with us and the broader community. And we'll be seeing you real soon. Have a great rest of your day. And now we're going to pivot, bringing in Alyson Esposito and Jesse Elliot with Cash in Northwest Arkansas. We are so happy to have you guys. Many folks watching today's program know both these people very well. And this is a really exciting, pivot point because, again, the Seattle folks, everybody's dealing with a lot of tricky stuff right now. But what we really want to focus on for our second half hour are some kind of more visionary, big picture infrastructure building things that they've been helping activate in Northwest Arkansas. And Alyson, I'm not sure if if you stepped away or you're still with us. We'll be back in a moment. But Jesse, how are you doing down there?
Well, perhaps appropriately, it's been a very Seattle-y week here, and I just want to first of all just shout out. Seattle is probably if not certainly one of the few biggest influences on my life, personally, creatively, professionally. I mean, truly, that entire scene created a lot of the music that brought me to music in the first place, and not just of a particular time period that people sometimes romanticize, but really throughout the decades. I mean, Seattle was always, both of the bands that I was in, it was our favorite place to tour, and it was from the tiny little tractor taverns all the way up to the big rooms and outdoor amphitheaters, and like that ecosystem is just such a beautiful place. So that's just, I don't know, a really deep, sincere thanks and to all of you doing amazing work in that scene that's been so important to like world music history and still is really vital. And Kate Becker, who we all know and love, worth shouting out that she has been a real hero of all of ours in Colorado when I was working there, but also here in Arkansas, where Northwest Arkansas is one of the 2021 Revs cohort regions. And Kate has already had a huge impact on some of the Zoom convenings that we've thrown for our local venues as we've tried to work through all these questions that Shannon and Scott and Kitty were bringing up today. Kate, as with lots of us, I'm sure, has been just really incredibly important in helping us to rethink how we're entering this crazy new era. It's hard to picture two more different geographies than Seattle and Northwest Arkansas, although there's a lot more in common than you'd think. You'd be surprised. I really appreciate Music Policy Forum for that reason. I think it's this cool mixtape that we all get to participate in. And this is like the hour of the week that I most look forward to every week. Whether I know what's going to happen or not, I know I can just like tune in and there's going to be some interesting geographies.
Stop it, Jesse, stop it. So we're
but I mean it. I don't know if it's like the Seattle rain outside today or what, but I was getting kind of emotional. I was like, this is so cool. This is like the closest thing we have to touring. And as those of you who know me know, touring is one of my favorite activities of all time.
It's fun. It's been such a privilege to do this work, do this program. I mean that sincerely, and again, as most of folks watching know, I've been involved in hosting in-person conferences for over 20 years, and it's going to be fun to get back to in person. But this is a whole different thing. We can do things with this technology that simply are not possible if you're trying to get someone to go to DC or go to a different, go to Austin or something. And it's really neat that we have this opportunity. So we're going to do a couple things that are going to be super fun. And again, part of what I love about Alyson, what you and Jesse are building, is that I think that there's an intention not only around, and I should say at the outset, and I know you would say this and emphasize this is not the two of you doing this. This is, connecting with an enormous amount of local resources and, thought leaders and artists and connectors. And so this is not you guys coming in and magically waving your whatever wand thing is that just builds creative infrastructure. So, but you're helping support and put some focus to what's happened in Northwest Arkansas. And you're also being extraordinarily generous in terms of what does this mean for other communities and how can this be sort of a laboratory that people can see themselves in it. And I want to start, this is really dumb, but we're going to start with a map. So Alex, do you mind, could you just call up the map real quick? Because again, like many of us in the music community, I've been extremely fortunate to travel a lot in this country. And it's really been hard for me to get my head around what Northwest Arkansas means. We hear it a lot. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about the geography? On the left, you can kind of get a larger sort of scope of where the Northwest Arkansas region fits into other communities. And then on the right is a little bit of a zoom in terms of where your actual Catch studios are based.
Yeah, that's right. And I came here most immediately from Colorado in Denver and in Fort Collins. I was working in those two communities for a while, but before that lived in DC and Mexico City and Copenhagen and other places that are decidedly non-Arkansan. Alyson came here most recently from Boston, but is sort of most well-known in the arts philanthropy field for all of the work she did kind of helping reinvent the arts philanthropy systems of Boston and Chicago. So again, fairly non-Arkansan. I had toured through here for a long time, so I had a sense of it already. But one thing that even when I moved here kind of blew my mind to think about was the day that I discovered that Northwest Arkansas is actually equidistant from New Orleans and Minneapolis. And this is like the one useful factoid that seems to register with people, because most people have some sense, if not where New Orleans and Minneapolis are, at least that they're very different places. And both of them are about 9.5 hours from us, north or south. Sort of pulling it closer in, we're in this like magical little diamond in the Ozark Mountains in the Ozarks that's between Kansas City, Tulsa, and Oklahoma City, Little Rock, and Memphis. So we also have these sort of like 4 amazing creative and music scenes, all known for very different things, right? The music history of Kansas City is very different from the music history of Memphis, is very different from Tulsa's. And we kind of sit right in the middle of that diamond. Most folks, if they know Northwest Arkansas specifically, know Fayetteville, which is a cool college town, University of Arkansas, very cosmopolitan, brings people in from all over the world. If you're in the corporate world, you might know Bentonville as the sort of headquarters. Really, the whole region is the headquarters of 3 of the Fortune 100 companies, Walmart, Tyson, and JB Hunt. Those all intermingle. And then I think less people know that it's also this amazing, really diverse melting pot, huge Latinx population, a huge, not huge, but very culturally significant Black population, very culturally significant Indigenous population, and then the largest population in the mainland U.S. of Marshallese folks. When we bombed the islands over there, a lot of the folks who we brought over here relocated to this area. So there's a really rich cultural hotbed. That doesn't even include the kind of Ozark folklore set and all of the stuff that came from Arkansas, whether it's, Sister Rosetta Tharpe or Johnny Cash, or more recently, folks like Janae Fleener and others who really affect the country and folk and Americana traditions. Does that give enough context for now?
I think that's great. And on that very bottom right of that last graphic, we don't need to go back to it, Alex, but on the very bottom right, you would see Hot Springs, which we need to call out as a hometown for our MPF co-founder and legendary troublemaker, Ashley Keaton. So got that as well. So Alyson, when did you arrive in town in Northwest Arkansas?
Yeah. I've been here for almost 2 years, but really, 6 months before the pandemic, to found and start up this intermediary organization. And so have been doing most of that, in the social justice movement of our time and in the pandemic, therefore really trying to look at what does it mean to create a new art service organization, arts council? What are the systems that we want to build from scratch? What are the best practices that we need to upend? All those kinds of things. So yeah, just 2 years.
So let's start big picture on what is cash. Let's just start. I don't know anything. So let's just start at the beginning. What do I need to know? What do we need to know? I don't know. I was role playing there, Jesse. I know a bunch, but
I'm going to frame one thing of sort of where we're at. And then Alyson, who is our most esteemed executive director, Kate, I can't move to Seattle just yet. She's on this Zoom call. I need to stick around and work hard here. But just to frame it, we really are at this sort of nascent point of the organization. Alyson's been here the longest for 18 months. The rest of us have joined in last year. There's 15 folks on our team. We're about to complete our first strategic planning process, like literally in the next month. So, and even a lot of stuff that we're going to say on this short little Zoom here will be just between us chickens, as my grandma Bonnie used to say, until we sort of announce stuff publicly. But you're all our close friends and peers, so we wanted to dump some of it out and really to use this as an invitation to collaborate a lot of the stuff that we're thinking about, because we're realistic about where we are in the literal and figurative scale of things and the map of things. A lot of what Alyson and I feel passionate about is getting our amazing local communities to collaborate and exchange. So CASH actually means Creative Arkansas Community Hub and Exchange. That's the E in CASH, and that E is very important for us. We want to do a lot of collaborating. We already have been doing a lot of collaborating with other places. And so we agreed with Michael to come on here, even though it's sort of like early in our process, because we wanted this to be our kind of crew, one of our crews that we could potentially collaborate on some interesting touring programs and artist residency stuff and disaster recovery stuff. It was so good to see Matt on here again. There's so many different ways I think that we can hook into these networks and hopefully help out you all So that's our invitation. Alyson, tell us who we are.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. I think really we're an intermediate organization, and we have these sort of two halves of this region that we're trying to connect. One is this incredible surplus of resources, right? We have the Waltons here. We have, these big business leaders that have been here for decades that are really excited to invest in arts, culture, and creativity in a different and more strategic way, and are at sort of the cusp of figuring that out. And then we have this rich, diverse creative community that has been here that Jesse was talking about, that really has not seen that investment. And so primarily through what we now have are 26 initiatives, we're trying to connect those two halves of our communities and sort of sitting in the middle there. And I would say that, that looks like spaces. We're standing up the first collaborative spaces that we have, seen in the region to bring folks together. It looks like municipal cultural planning and policymaking. It looks like music ecosystems work, music here. There's a critical mass of musicians. We just completed our first study. We've sort of been like, who the heck is here? Everyone wave your flag. Let's figure it all out, and have been blown away by just the sheer numbers. But music is very richly present. And so, we're going to be doing a lot in that space. And of course, that's why we grabbed Jesse and got him over here, and for many other reasons. We're looking at arts and culture and creativity really broadly. We're focused on the nonprofit sector, but also individual artists, also the creative industries, and really, don't care what discipline you're working in, supporting everybody from tattoo artists to those that have formal training in visual art form, and et cetera. And I would just say, we're really working to connect 5 disparate and very unique communities that have sort of regional turf wars that go on a little bit, where, one side doesn't want to go to the other. And the way that Jesse and I see it is just that, really, if you look at it all and you sort of step back as a region, the MSA is about 650,000 people. It's expected to double within 3 to 5 years, right? So it's a bonkers scenario of growth. And so we're trying to knit them all together, really, and get folks to collaborate and connect differently. We think that we have nearly everything that we need here locally if folks can start working together differently. So that's a big part of our mission right now.
And is the growth anticipated? This is, again, I'm asking like totally unfair questions today, so I apologize, but is there a sense that the growth is sort of organic, that for a bunch of geographic and other reasons, housing prices and other communities, other things, that there's anticipated that's going to happen? Or is that part of a strategy where basically the city leader or community leaders in the region are like, we actually want to grow, like we're going to hit the gas, we want people to come, we want to scale?
All of the above. I would say it's really led by the large corporations that are here, that are designing and creating, new giant scale work centers and so forth, and are very focused on talent attraction. But also, it's a great place to live. We keep getting that designation in terms of quality of life in all the various publications. And so
I really think more in like an analogy I think more folks on this call will know is this place is really like what Colorado was looking like 10 or 15 years ago. It's a serious combination of like it's called the natural state, right? Arkansas is, and that's not just a euphemism. It is a really beautiful, beautiful place when it comes to nature. I mean, the Ozarks are just like majestic and mysterious and weird and full of mystical creative powers. And I think that combined with the low cost of living, it's the same as the Colorado story, 10 or 15 years ago, which has changed now quite a bit. And then combined with the sort of talent attraction thing, which is, from those types of companies. I think one of our big challenges is how do we balance that desire for growth with also, like all of us on this call, having seen the intensely fast gentrification curve that gets out of everybody's control before you can do anything about it. We feel like we're at this cusp moment where if we don't start building in things like more affordable housing, not just for artists and creatives, although of course that's our sort of central thing, but just more affordable life in general. If we don't do that now, this region, what'll happen with this region is what's happened with the Front Range in the last few years in Denver and Boulder and whatnot. So it's all those.
So Something that's been a really interesting dynamic to watch during the shutdown is sort of the elevation of stuff that many of us have been navigating for a long time, which is the sort of tension between, kind of public sector, nonprofit art sector, commercial sector. Who feels responsibility for these different sectors? What does that mean in terms of policy or funding, or particularly public funding? Now, Jesse, of course, you were deeply involved in the creation of the Colorado Music Strategy, which is really one of the nation's first, and I would argue leading efforts, for the state arts agency to kind of engage around understanding and trying to support the creative economy, not just the nonprofit sector. Yeah. Alyson, you've been in local art agency world and been thinking about how that needs to shift or have maybe different thinking or, kind of evolving thinking. So could you speak a little bit about where cash fits sort of in terms of org chart land, in terms of like the entities that are behind it or kind of where it's incubated?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're wanting to think about diverse funding and support streams like anybody else. There is a huge lack of public funding in Arkansas. It's one of the poorest per capita, arts funded states in the country. What'd you say?
At a state level, sorry.
At a state level, we're working closely with all the municipalities who actually have done a pretty good job, because Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art was built here about a decade ago to national and global significance. Honestly, it's free. 77% of the state goes. It's beautiful. It's pretty extraordinary. Folks already understand. There's this sort of deep understanding that why arts and culture are important for economic development, for tourism, for all the things that folks are thinking about. And so the public funding has followed from a local and municipal level to some extent, although I would say we're working on strategy there. But yeah, we basically are funded by the large businesses that are here, the large families that are here, and we have contracts with many municipalities and many public spaces that are looking for the first time to think about programming and what it means to do that sort of with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How are things in the region? Like, again, we talk a lot about, again, to use Seattle as an example, just because they're on with us today, the importance of having the local curators and connectors. So The Stranger was mentioned as a local weekly. Of course, we know KXP. We know that there's sort of a whole infrastructure of people who have jobs and are passionate to talk about the local culture, to promote it, to create context around it. Is that infrastructure exist in your region? I imagine the university houses some of that. Is that stuff that you're looking at in terms of trying to help support, or does that really need to be more of an organic thing?
Yeah, but both. Again, I think it's one of those misconceptions that we all carry around, that because this is a quote unquote red state, although trending purple, and the counties that we live in are sort of purple trending blue, that kind of stuff wouldn't exist. But I think anybody who's lived in a smaller town or maybe somewhere off the beaten path a little bit more knows that there are actually a fairly diverse set of humans that live almost anywhere. Like, that creativity is kind of an inherent thing that just sort of bubbles up from all of us. And so you have all these little groups that sort of naturally form. So we have all the sort of alt weeklies and cool radio stations and NPR stations. And I think there's a lot of different levels. I would say what it's most known for is those kind of very high level institutions like the Crystal Bridges and the Momentary type of crowd. But then of course it's got sort of like the upper middle class, symphonies and ballet groups and things like that. I think we're really trying to foster more of the diverse, organic, grassroots, again, individual artists, mom and pop for-profits, like Alyson said, whether it's a tattoo shop or a food truck or that from the Latinx or Marshallese community, or some cool new creative business that somebody had an idea for. That's really the stuff that we're trying to grow more, just because it hasn't had institutional support in the past. But it's all here. It just needs a little more, TLC.
And Alyson, when you mentioned earlier 5 communities, you meant literally different cities, literally communities, not metaphorically different sectors.
Yeah, we're working at the regional level, and so there's a few efforts that are being invested in at this regional level, where they're really like, okay, let's just pull up and pull back and try and get everybody to play. And so, yeah, I mean, to Jesse's point, one of the communities is almost 50% Latinx, and there's really amazing, grassroots vibe going on and house hip hop shows every night and that kind of thing. And then adjacent to that is the very sort of fancy upper crust high art thing going on. And so it's really just how do we get all of it to blend together from a resource sort of equitable distribution standpoint, but also like audiences and there being a scene. So yeah, all of it.
It's been so great to get to know a lot of your folks through the Reds Initiative. And can you speak a little bit to your vision for reopening and what to expect in the second half of this year and kind of what that means to springboard into 22?
It's an interesting one, especially in this group, because it occurs to me, even as I was sort of listening to the Seattle group talk, there are all these advantages and disadvantages that come with different cultural stews, right? And one of the advantages to being in this weird purpley place that has people from all over the political map, whether conscientious objectors that moved here in the 60s and 70s and set up camp out in the woods and still have cool retreat centers and recording studios and whatever in the Ozarks, up to like the very most sort of stereotypical Trump flag waving neighbors of mine, for instance, and kind of everything in between. One advantage to that weird political mix is that we never fully shut down. It didn't feel like we sort of 65 to 75% shut down, depending on what month you were talking about. And so the reopening conversation it's kind of just been with us in a more everyday way than what it feels like to me in other places that I've been to, where it's like you pull all the way back and then trying to get all the way back forward into it can be quite jolting. I think the word whiplash was what Scott used, which is exactly right. We didn't quite have that combined with, and famously in the beginning, right? Like the New York Times was writing understandably semi-disparaging articles about like the first concert back in Fort Smith, Arkansas and stuff like that, which is just an hour down the road from us. It's just outside of Northwest Arkansas. I think that combined with the fact that it is a very outdoorsy place. And so like a Colorado, there's already a lot of infrastructure that's built in. And by that, I mean like on the ground, every bar, every venue has some kind of outdoor patio. And they were just kind of like, well, let's move stuff outside. Like it's a very pragmatic, immediate thing. Having said that, of course, there were venues that we had to totally shut down and folks who take that very seriously. And as you know, Michael, we're now sort of in the process of having those conversations to open it back up. We were just on a call yesterday with a guy named Eddie Vega, who is the sort of Latinx kingpin, like media mogul of this region for the last like 25 years. And he was caught in this really interesting bind because he has a 3,500 capacity venue that serves 95% Latinx clientele. And of course, with issues of equity and accessibility, as far as testing and vaccines and all that go, this was like a major, Eddie was both the hardest hit and also sort of it was like a double whammy. Also the one who like cared most about his very specific community, not getting back into a mix that would be in any way dangerous. So he's been very hesitant, even though as a business owner, as a for-profit creative industries guy his entire life, he's like, I need to get back open and I need to start making this venue sustainable again. He's finally going to do his first show in just about a week now. And so I think that to us is kind of a lot of places have already reopened in the last couple months. And that is going to be a real turning point when Eddie's place and other folks like that start sort of following suit.
I got two more for you real quick. And Alex, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you could call the map up again real quick, I'd really appreciate it. Because again, some of the synergies with Seattle, part of what Kate Becker and others have been working on pre-pandemic was the notion of this cascading music corridor that would really try to align strategies, with Seattle, Portland, Boise, up to Anchorage, Vancouver. And I am just struck when you look at that map on the left there, and Tulsa didn't make it on the map, but Tulsa is about 2 hours, right? You got Kansas City, St. Louis, Memphis, Shreveport. I mean, you've got about a quarter?
Tulsa's actually the closest of any of those big cities. It's right where it says Choctaw Nation on the map. Tulsa's just on that yellow interstate line just north of there. So it's only about an hour and 45 minutes away from
Yeah, so you've got pretty remarkable you're at the center of about a 4 to 5 hour drive.
Yeah.
Or a lot, and also the potential of making a loop there when you're looking at St. Louis, Kansas City, Wichita, also Dallas, Metroplex, et cetera. Where are you guys in terms of are you thinking I know you're talking regionally in terms of literally your Arkansas region, but are you also starting to lay the groundwork for more regional touring networks, more regional collaboration and strategies?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And part of that is just the worlds that Alyson and I come from. We have this sort of DIY independent touring mindset, which is like, you build it in concentric circles. And we have felt like actually a lot of the last year has been a sort of good hunkering down within our region. But at the same time, Alyson and I just got back from a visit to Tulsa, which is kind of a mind-blowingly cool place right now. I mean, Tulsa was cool 15 years ago, but it's really cool now. And Kansas City is the same. We're going to go up there in a couple of weeks and visit with some folks. Interestingly, like one of the common threads, it's not the only common thread, but there are some really progressive family foundations in all of these places that are doing this work. So Kaiser and Tulsa, Kaufman and Kansas City, and then the Waltons and Tysons and other folks here are all, and obviously St. Louis and Memphis has a fair amount of that population as well. So I think we're starting to knit together some of that institutional stuff so that artists can exchange, do different touring programs, residency programs, et cetera. But yeah, that's right on.
And I'm going to end, and thanks, Alex, and take the map down. Again, with a question, Alyson, that may be a little bit more rhetorical. If you don't have an answer, it's okay. It's all good. But, a lot of what we've been talking about over the last, year, I mean, certainly what we've been talking about for years, right? For literally 10, 15 years, it's been accelerated during the shutdown and the transition to the administration, and the success of the Save Our Stages campaign, which again, $16.25 billion more money than has gone to the NEA and NEH combined over a 50-year history. There's this kind of recalibration of what can we be asking the federal government to do in terms of policy and funding resources. And there's a lot of conversation about how sort of local philanthropy can then be, ideally sort of an inspiration to help advocates, reframe the conversation. Is there anything you could speak to from your experience in different communities and working in the arts agency world and now coming down here to Northwest Arkansas, how that can bridge up in a tangible way instead of just throwing money at problems, but like what real investment could look like?
Oh gosh, I mean, this is the $1 million question, right? But I think I'm personally right now working with some folks at the NEA and some folks on a task force to figure out how the next tranche of relief funds can touch the ground a little bit differently, and what that looks like and who the intermediaries are that have access to, I would say, beyond the traditional large nonprofits in the country, right? And so I think there's a lot of work happening right now behind the scenes to figure that out. And it's really interesting because a lot of the best intermediaries across the country that have access to the communities in most need just really haven't been at the table. So I think it's sort of again, identification of who's out there that can help to sort of spread that around differently. And then what that will mean for the future of how federal resources are activated, I think is also really fascinating. So I think we're middle of it. We have no answers, but I'm hopeful.
Well, it's exciting to see that, again, and we don't like to talk politics on this program, but to be out of the mindset of having to just justify basic infrastructure like Corporation Public Broadcasting or the NEA, and now being a mindset of really trying to be thought partners with policymakers who are saying, basically we're spending the money, like the money is going to be spent. HUD is going to spend $68 billion a year. I mean, all these investments are going to be made. And just a willingness to say, what does this mean, not conceptually, but in a very practical way, as we're thinking about housing policies, we're thinking about how we want to reshape our music industry and have a more equitable music industry. As we think about digital infrastructure. I mean, I know that Arkansas, like many states, struggles with access to internet and wireless broadband. And how do we, again, think about that not as a luxury, but as a necessity? And how do we take action to make sure people can get on these platforms, either as consumers or to run their business, but also, industry. So there's a lot to it, but we're just so excited that you all are doing the work that you're doing. And we are so appreciative that you're doing it in a way that is, again, community-based. That's what you said earlier. We really take to heart that we're all excited to come visit y'all. We want to learn what you're doing. We want to see what we can apply to our communities. And we're just really, really stoked. So We're over time. I apologize for that. Thank you, Jesse and Alyson, of course. Thank you, Shannon, Kitty, and Scott, as always. Matthew, thank you for jumping in. Alex, great job producing as ever. Again, this show will be archived. We'll be up early next week. If you saw something today that you thought was interesting, you want to share with friends, please share the link and get the word out. As always, we welcome and appreciate your feedback, suggestions, questions, ideas, very gently worded constructive criticism. You can always contact us at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com. Have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.